My name is Hannah Carter. I'm 46 years old, a high school guidance counselor, a wife of 19 years, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought exhaustion was just part of being a good person. I thought love meant picking up the slack. I thought being the strong one was a compliment. I thought, "You're better at this," was a thank you in disguise. Until the day my husband walked into the kitchen, laid off the caregiver we hired for his mother without consulting me, and said with his jaw tight and voice casual like we were talking about switching detergents, "You're home most afternoons. You can just do it." No discussion. No, "How do you feel about this?" No, "Can we make this work together?" You can just do it. Like I was a piece of furniture being moved from one room to another. Like I was available. Like my schedule, my boundaries, my body weren't real things. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just stood there in my stained work blouse with a half-prepped dinner on the counter, and I blinked. "Excuse me?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "You know her routine better, and we're spending too much. The home aide charges $30 an hour. You're her daughter-in-law. You care." You care. As if care was a reason to be handed responsibility without consent, as if care was supposed to come without backup. I walked to the sink, rinsed a carrot that I was slicing for stew, out of habit because I didn't know what else to do with my hands, and I nodded slowly. "I do care," I said, "but apparently only I do." He laughed like I was being dramatic. "You always say you're overwhelmed," he said, still not looking at me. "But you're home early every day. Come on, it's not that much. You sit and talk to kids for a living." That was it. That sentence. You sit and talk to kids for a living. As if my entire career was a joke. As if every child I talked out of self-harm, every panicked call I made to a parent, every tear I dried, every trauma I had to take home with me and carry silently in my bones, meant nothing. I set the knife down gently, walked away from the stew, pulled my bag from the coat hook, and walked up the stairs. I heard him call after me once, "Wait, where are you going?" But I didn't answer. I went to the bedroom, opened the closet, pulled down my suitcase, the one I hadn't touched since our last trip to North Carolina, a trip I planned, booked, packed for, drove us to, and he scrolled through sports news the entire weekend like I was his chauffeur and not his wife. The zipper stuck. I tugged it open like I was pulling open a wound. I didn't cry. Not then. I folded clothes mechanically. Underwear, jeans, a blouse I used to love before it became just another thing I ironed for school meetings. I packed my hairbrush, my toothbrush, a travel-sized bottle of body wash that still smelled like the only vacation we ever truly enjoyed. 12 years ago in Charleston, before life turned into spreadsheets and prescriptions and his mother's blood pressure medication. Downstairs, I could hear cabinets opening. He probably thought I was coming down to finish dinner. Instead, I came down with a suitcase. He was at the stove, poking at the stew like he expected it to finish itself. He turned and froze when he saw me. "What are you doing?" I didn't stop walking. "Leaving." "For how long?" "Long enough for you to learn what $30 an hour really buys." He blinked, confused, defensive, already trying to flip the script. "You're seriously walking out over this? You're just gonna abandon her?" I stopped, set the suitcase down, looked him in the eye. I'm giving her back to the son who thinks I'm just a cheaper version of professional help." He opened his mouth. I raised my hand. Don't tell me you didn't mean it that way. Don't pretend this was a conversation. Don't insult me by acting like I'm being rash. You made a decision without me, about me, and assumed I'd just go along with it. You didn't ask. You assigned. So now, I'm reassigning. He stared at me like I was speaking a language he didn't understand. And maybe I was. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't translating myself into something more palatable. I was done softening my sentences, done diluting my exhaustion into something cute and manageable, done being useful at the cost of being seen. I turned back toward the door. He followed me. "Where are you even going?" "Out." To who? To me. He stood there like he expected the world to bend back in his favor, like his shock was enough to reverse the damage. It wasn't. I left the notes on the counter, I said calmly. The med schedule, her breakfast preferences, the emergency contacts, all of it. Let's see how long you last. I didn't slam the door, I just walked out, suitcase rolling behind me, and didn't look back. Not yet, because looking back was how I stayed stuck for 19 years. And I was finally walking forward, alone. And for once, not afraid of that. It's strange what you remember once silence finally has space to stretch out. I sat in the car that night, parked outside a mid-range motel with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign, and stared at the steering wheel like it had answers. The engine was off, but my pulse was still racing, like my body didn't believe it was finally done holding it all in. I should have felt free, triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Not sad, not relieved, just scraped out. Like every version of me had been clawing to get out of that house, and now that I was out, none of them knew what came next. I checked in under my maiden name, something I hadn't said aloud in years. The receptionist barely looked up, just handed me a key and circled the ice machine. Room 217. It smelled like old detergent and someone else's cologne. The bedspread had cigarette burns, the lamp leaned slightly, and I'd never felt more unburdened. I sat on the edge of the bed with my shoes still on and just stared at the wall. This is what solitude really feels like, I thought. Not absence, not punishment, not abandonment, just space. Pure, undiluted space to breathe without being told how much oxygen I'm allowed to use. For 19 years, I built a life around his rhythms, his job, his stress levels, his mother's appointments, his moods. I matched them like a chameleon, always adjusting, always smoothing the edges. Even before his mother moved in, I had been her caretaker by proxy, the one who called to remind her of her checkups, the one who picked out her birthday card every year because he always forgot, the one who cleaned her house after her surgery while he handled things from the couch, scrolling through his phone like logistics took energy he didn't possess. He was always so tired, you see. That was the running script, that he worked hard, that he was under pressure, that he couldn't help how he snapped, that I needed to be patient because he was trying. That word, trying. It became a catch-all for every moment he failed me. He was trying when he forgot our anniversary. He was trying when he called me dramatic for crying over doing Thanksgiving alone for the 3rd year in a row. He was trying when he left me to manage his mother's prescriptions, appointments, and insurance calls. And every time I got close to reaching my breaking point, he'd say something just sweet enough, just apologetic enough, to make me doubt myself. You're just so much better at these things. You're more patient. She listens to you more. Compliments disguised as shackles. I started to believe them, that I was the one with the endless well of energy, that I didn't mind sacrificing, that being the strong one was my role, my identity, my virtue. But strength is not a virtue when it's constantly exploited. Strength, when expected without reprieve, becomes servitude. I took a shower in that motel bathroom, let the cheap water pressure hit the back of my neck, and cried without sobbing. No sound, just tears mixing with steam, sliding down skin that had been on autopilot for too long. I remembered the first time I met his mother. She had a sharp tongue but kind eyes. She liked me immediately, said I was too good for her son. I laughed back then, thought it was her version of affection. Now I wondered if it had been a warning. When she moved in after her fall, I was the one who set up the spare room, stocked her medications, coordinated her PT appointments. He installed the TV in her room and acted like he'd scaled a mountain. And yet, I never complained. Not really. Because complaining made me feel selfish, and he made sure I believed that too. "You act like you're doing this alone," he said once. "You know how much stress I'm under?" I remember that line because I was folding his laundry while he said it. His boxers, his socks, the stupid golf shirt he wore like a second skin. He was sitting down. I was standing. That was our dynamic. Always had been. And then came yesterday, when he fired the caregiver, the one we spent months finding, the one his mother had finally warmed up to. Just like that. Fired her without a conversation. Just poof, gone. And I was supposed to just do it. As if caregiving was my biological function. As if I owed him that. As if marriage came with a job description titled Wife Equals Free Labor. But I didn't erupt. Not at first. That's the thing with long marriages. You learn to bury your eruptions under towels and recipes and silence. Until one day, you don't. And when I walked out that door with my suitcase, it wasn't a dramatic flourish. It was math. Years of subtraction with no deposit. Love isn't love when it's used like a ledger. When your value is measured by how much you're willing to absorb. I lay back on the motel bed, the springs groaning beneath me, and stared at the ceiling like it might offer a next step. It didn't. So I closed my eyes and let the silence be enough. For the first time in 19 years, there was no dinner to finish, no medication schedule to follow, no one asking when I'd be back. It was terrifying, and it was sacred. Because sometimes, before you can build a new life, you have to sit in the ruins of the old one and feel every ache, every betrayal, every lost version of yourself that you buried under the title of good wife. And that night, I lay there in a motel room with nothing but my suitcase and the ache of becoming someone new, and for once I didn't flinch at the emptiness. I welcomed it. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm that didn't exist. No cat pawing at the door, no husband rustling for his work keys, just a strip of sunlight creeping across the motel ceiling like a slow exhale. And for a brief, jarring moment, I panicked. Not because I regretted leaving, but because I didn't know what to do next. I had spent the last decade moving in response to other people's needs. Wake up when he needed coffee, drive his mother to therapy, rearrange my work schedule for her appointments, cancel dinner plans because he forgot to mention a meeting. My entire life had been built around absorbing surprises. Now I was the surprise. Now I was the disruption. And it felt good. Not easy, but good. Like finally standing on a leg you'd forgotten how to use. It hurts at first, but the ache means it's waking back up. I brushed my teeth slowly, taking up time like it was mine to waste. Threw on a hoodie, took my keys, and went to get coffee. By myself, for myself, with no guilt layered over the foam. There was a tiny diner across the street. No Wi-Fi, chipped mugs, the kind of place that still had a jukebox even though no one played it. I sat at a corner booth, ordered pancakes and eggs, and pulled out my phone. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from him. I didn't listen, not yet, because I already knew the script. It would start with confusion. Where are you? Then guilt. How could you do this to me? Then blame. This is childish, Hannah. Come home and let's talk. Let's talk. As if that had ever meant both people were allowed to speak. I sipped my coffee and stared out the window, thinking back to the months before this, all the signs I ignored, the little ways I had slowly stopped existing in my own life, like how he referred to me as her when talking to his friends. Her schedule's flexible. She's better at handling Mom. She doesn't mind. I did mind, but I swallowed it, because that's what women are taught, to mind less, to be flexible, to see our capacity for pain as proof of our goodness. I remembered a fight we had 3 months ago, a small one, about groceries of all things. He snapped that I'd forgotten almond milk, his mom's preference. I had just worked a 10-hour shift, missed lunch, and came home to 3 voicemails from her clinic. I stared at him, holding that stupid grocery bag like it was evidence of my failure, and he said it. If this is too hard, just say so. That was his favorite out, to pretend like I had choices, like I wasn't already doing everything, like asking for help was weakness, and anything less than martyrdom meant I wasn't trying. Back in the diner, the waitress dropped the check on my table. I left a generous tip. Not because the service was amazing, but because someone had brought me hot food without asking for anything in return. And that alone felt like a miracle. I got back to my car and finally listened to one voicemail. He sounded tired, not panicked, just inconvenienced. Hey, so I gave her meds, but she keeps asking where you are. I told her you're just, out. Can you maybe call her? She's being kind of difficult. Also, where's the blood pressure monitor? I can't find it. He ended with, anyway, call me back when you've calmed down. When I've calmed down. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I messed up. Not, are you okay? Just a breadcrumb trail of deflection. It was remarkable, really, how easily he made my exhaustion sound like an emotion. Like all of this was a tantrum, a mood swing. Like I'd taken off my wedding ring because I was hormonal, and not because I was done setting myself on fire to keep his ego warm. I didn't call back. Instead, I drove to a park we used to take his mom to before her mobility declined. I remembered pushing her wheelchair past the duck pond, her eyes lighting up at the toddlers toddling near the edge. I remembered thinking, this is what good daughters-in-law do. This is love. This is service. Now I sat on a bench alone watching someone else's family feed crumbs to geese, and I realized something that should have made me weep but didn't. I had confused servitude with love, and I wasn't alone. So many women I knew, friends, co-workers, my own mother, had shaped their lives around other people's comfort and called it devotion. But it wasn't devotion. It was erasure. It was learned silence. It was a system that benefits from our burnout. It was a cycle passed down from woman to woman like a cursed recipe for martyrdom. And somewhere deep in my marrow, I knew if I went back now, it would never stop. Not with this, not with caregiving, not with the way he made my time sound elastic and my fatigue sound fake. If I went back now, I was giving him permission to treat me like this forever, and I couldn't unsee that anymore. I sat on that bench until the sun moved, watched the shadows change shape, felt the wind brush my cheeks like a blessing. Then I opened my phone and typed one sentence into a blank note. I am not the answer to anyone else's laziness. I saved it. Read it twice. Then I turned off my phone, and I didn't turn it back on for the rest of the day, because silence might have once been the prison he kept me in. But now, silence belonged to me, and I was finally free to decide what it meant. I never used to make lists for myself. I made grocery lists, to-do lists, doctor's appointment lists, lists that hung on the fridge and helped other people function, but never lists that served me. That changed the third night I was gone. I was staying at a friend's guest house by then, Nahla. She didn't ask for details, just handed me a spare key, hugged me once, and said, "You can scream into the pillow or just sleep. Either one's fine." She knew, without me saying it, that something inside me had finally snapped, not in fury, but in clarity. That night, I sat cross-legged on her guest bed with a cheap spiral notebook and a pen that skipped, and I wrote at the top of the page, "Evidence." Not for court, not for anyone else, for me. Because I had spent years telling myself it wasn't that bad, that I should be grateful, that a bad day wasn't a bad life. But that was the lie, and I needed to see the truth laid out in ink, so I made the list. The day he forgot my birthday while planning a golf trip with his co-workers, and then told me, "You don't like a fuss anyway." The week I had the flu and still had to drive his mother to 3 appointments because he had back-to-back meetings. The time his mother wet herself in the living room and he stood there frozen while I cleaned it up, then later said, "You handled that so well, babe." The fact that he's never, not once, asked what I need. The last time he bought me flowers, 5 years ago, after a fight, to make it even. The caregiver he fired without a conversation, without a plan, without respect. 6 lines. That's all it took to unravel 19 years of pretending I was loved in the same way I loved back. I stared at the list for a long time, then flipped the page and started another. What I want. The pen hovered at first. It felt selfish to even ask the question, but slowly, shakily, I wrote, a Sunday morning where I don't have to be anything for anyone. To eat a hot meal without reheating it 3 times because someone else needed something. To be asked, how are you? To read a book from start to finish in one sitting. To laugh without checking if someone's annoyed. To be seen. To be chosen. By myself. I didn't cry when I finished. I smiled. A small, surprised thing that broke across my face like sunlight slipping through blinds. I was still in there, under the years, under the exhaustion, under the role of caregiver, wife, peacemaker, scheduler, fixer. There was still a me, and she was asking for the mic back. I closed the notebook, tucked it under my pillow, and slept for 9 straight hours. No interruptions, no alarms, no guilt. The next morning, I woke up to 6 new texts, one from his mother. Hey, sweetheart, are you okay? Your husband says you just needed a break. I hope you're resting. I miss our tea. And it hit me. She didn't know. She didn't know she was the reason I left, because I never told her, because I didn't want her to feel like a burden, because I thought I could absorb it all without bleeding. But I was bleeding, quietly. Internally, daily, and her son watched me hemorrhage and handed me a mop instead of a bandage. I stared at the message for a long time. I cared about her, genuinely. She wasn't cruel, just complicit in a system that taught women like me to smile through servitude. I replied, I'm okay, just needed air. You are not the reason. I'll call soon. I didn't send that for her. I sent it for me, because I refused to carry guilt that didn't belong to me anymore. Later that day, I did something I never imagined. I called my boss and requested 3 weeks of unpaid leave. I told her I had a personal reset in progress. She paused, then said, take it, Hannah. You've earned 1,000 of them. And just like that, I had time. Real, unscheduled, unpaid, uncommodified time. The kind of time men take without permission, the kind of time women feel they must earn through exhaustion. And I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew what I wouldn't do with it. I wouldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because once you start making lists for your own survival, you realize how many of them you buried just to stay lovable. And I was done being loved conditionally. Done trading my peace for approval. I wasn't making threats. I was making space. And that's more dangerous than rage. That's the beginning of freedom. It was around day 6 when the tone of his messages started to shift, not toward remorse, toward control. The first few were textbook damage control. Hey, I know you're mad, but we should talk this through like adults. This is bigger than a misunderstanding. Don't blow it out of proportion. You didn't have to leave. I didn't make you do anything. And then came the one that lit a fire in my stomach. I've taken care of her all week. It's not that hard. I don't see what your problem was. There it was. Not that hard. As if the forgotten meds, the wrong dosage, the missed PT appointment, and the half-eaten meals she hadn't touched were just bumps, not warnings. I called her the next morning. She sounded tired, confused, a little more disoriented than usual. Your husband's been helping, she said, hesitant. But he gets so frustrated. I try not to ask for too much. I felt something fracture inside me, not for him, for her, because she was adjusting herself to survive his impatience. And I knew exactly how that felt. It was always subtle with him. He never yelled, never hit, never raised a hand. He just sighed, rolled his eyes, muted the conversation, used silence as punishment, made you feel like your emotions were sandpaper against his peace. And after a while, you learn to sand yourself down, No rough edges, no sharp needs, just smooth, agreeable, exhausted compliance. I had once believed that was marriage. Now I knew it was survival wrapped in a wedding band. I told her gently to keep taking her meds and that I'd check in again soon. She said okay. She said she missed me. She didn't ask when I'd come back. Maybe she knew too, that this wasn't a vacation. It was a line in the sand. Later that night, I got an email, not a text, an email. Subject line: "Let's be adults." I opened it with a strange mix of curiosity and nausea. That's what he always did, used calm, professional tones to coat his selfishness in logic. Hannah. Look, I don't know what else to say. You walking out was a complete overreaction. I made a decision to protect our finances. You took it personally. You're acting like I asked you to suffer. I just thought we could handle this ourselves, as a family. Isn't that what marriage is about? If you're serious about separation, then let's talk about that. But if this is just a meltdown, let's stop playing games. You're not 25 anymore. It's time to stop running every time something gets hard. Let me know when you're ready to come home. Or I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand it, because I needed to sit with how deep the disrespect ran. Overreaction, meltdown, running away. He wasn't confused, he was threatened. Because for the first time, I had made a decision he couldn't control, spin, or minimize, and he didn't know what to do with that. I closed the laptop, got up, poured myself a glass of wine, and instead of responding, I opened that same notebook from earlier. This time, I titled the page, "What He Thinks I Forgot." I held his mother's hand through 2 falls, 1 panic attack, and a UTI that almost put her in the hospital. I drove her to the ER at 2 a.m. because he was too tired and had a big morning. I tracked her blood pressure for 7 months on a chart I designed myself. I stopped seeing my own mother because she didn't want too many visitors. I worked full-time, cooked 5 nights a week, planned every holiday, handled the taxes, and still remembered his dry cleaning. I made myself small so he could feel big. I didn't need to send that list because it wasn't for him, it was for me. Proof that I had not lost my mind, that I had not overreacted, that I had not run away. I had walked out with intention. I had walked out on a man who called unpaid caregiving a financial decision. I had walked out on a husband who confused endurance with devotion. I had walked out on a household where my exhaustion was treated like a character flaw instead of a survival symptom. And I wasn't walking back in because he finally noticed the silence. I was only just learning to hear myself in it. 2 days later, a letter came in the mail. He'd found out where I was. Inside was a printed copy of the caregiver's termination agreement, a list of bills, a proposal for how we could divide the house if we decided to go that route. At the bottom, he wrote, "I hope this was worth it." I stared at those 6 words like they were a dare. I hope this was worth it, as if the cost of my own freedom needed to be justified, as if I was supposed to measure liberation against inconvenience. And I realized something then. He never saw me as a partner. He saw me as a utility, valuable when functioning, disposable when not. That night, I called my lawyer, not because I was ready to file anything, but because I needed someone to remind me that I was not crazy, that I had rights, that what I'd been living through had a name: coercive control. He didn't flinch, just said, "Now take your time, Hannah. But I'll be here whenever you're ready." I was, not to punish, but to protect myself. Because anyone who calls your boundaries a meltdown was never interested in meeting you halfway. They were just hoping you'd never leave the starting line. I used to imagine what it would feel like to be seen, not watched, seen. There's a difference. Being watched is when someone glances at you from across the room, waiting for the laundry to be folded or the rice to boil. Being seen is someone noticing you haven't sat down all day and pulling out a chair. My husband never pulled out that chair, and I don't mean that figuratively. I mean, in 19 years of meals, events, holidays, restaurants, he never once offered me a seat before taking his own. It was always assumed I'd serve, that I'd refill the glasses, pick up the napkins, smile when he told stories that twisted truth into performance. I was useful, but I was never seen. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until one afternoon, sitting across from Nahla as we shared lunch on her patio. She'd taken the afternoon off, just to sit with me. No agenda, no advice, no probing, just presence. We talked about nothing, about music, old high school friends, the way aging suddenly sneaks up on your knees and your laugh lines. We sipped iced tea and passed a bowl of cherries back and forth, and in a lull, she said quietly, "You used to love teaching poetry. What happened?" And I just stared at her, because it had been years since anyone asked what I loved. He never asked, not once. Never asked why I stayed late at work sometimes just to sit in an empty classroom. Never asked why I stopped painting. Never asked if I was okay the night I came home and sat in the garage with the engine off and the radio on for 40 minutes before going inside. But Nahla remembered. She remembered because she saw me before I became invisible. I blinked back tears and said, "I don't know. I guess I got tired." But the truth was more brutal. I stopped loving things because I wasn't allowed to be someone who wanted. I was supposed to be someone who gave. My identity had been whittled down to a service role. Hannah, the responsible one, the caregiver, the wife, the scheduler, the strong woman. And everyone loves a strong woman, right up until she gets tired of being used. I went home that night. Nala's guest house felt more like home than my real one ever did, and I opened a new page in my notebook. I wrote, "Questions he never asked me." Are you happy? Do you need help? What do you dream about? Are you lonely? Do you feel loved? Is there anything I'm doing that hurts you? That last one hit me the hardest, because I had asked that so many times. Whenever we fought, I'd ask what I could do better, what he needed, what I was missing. I apologized for things I didn't do just to keep the peace. He never once mirrored that, and I used to think that meant I was stronger, more emotionally intelligent, more evolved. Now I knew the truth. It meant I had accepted a relationship where empathy only flowed in one direction. That wasn't maturity. That was survival in disguise. I thought back to the time I told him I was feeling burned out. His response? Maybe you should get better at managing your stress. Meditate or something. Not, what can I do to help lighten your load? Not, you're doing too much. Just, fix it quietly. So I did. For years. I fixed it quietly. Held the weight of his mother's decline. Held our finances together during his job slump. Held his emotions during his silent spells. Held myself in pieces when no one else offered hands. But even stone wears down under pressure, and I was done mistaking erosion for resilience. That week, I did something radical. I signed up for a poetry workshop. 6 weeks, Saturday mornings. No spouse discount. No check-in calls allowed. Just me, a notebook, and a room full of strangers who didn't know me as the wife of someone important or the unpaid nurse to someone declining. Just a woman with words. The first class, I barely spoke. But when it came time to write, I filled 4 pages in 20 minutes. It poured out of me like something that had been caged. I didn't share it aloud. Not yet. But the instructor, a woman named Deborah with a halo of silver curls and a voice like melted candle wax, walked past me, glanced at my pages, and said gently, "There's power in wounds that don't lie." And I almost burst into tears, because for the first time in years, someone saw my pain not as a weakness or a problem to be fixed, but as proof of something valuable. I walked out of that room feeling 10 pounds lighter, and when I got back to Nala's place, I found an envelope taped to the guest house door. No name, just, "Please read." I didn't need to open it to know who it was from, but I did. Inside was a note, his handwriting messy like always, and a single sentence. "I didn't know you felt this way." I laughed, out loud, bitter and sharp, because, yes, you did. You just didn't listen, or worse, you did, and you chose to ignore it, because men like him don't hear things unless they come in the form of loss. And even then, they don't grieve what they lost. They grieve the control they had over it. I didn't respond, didn't fold the note, didn't keep it. I walked outside, held it over the patio lighter, and let the paper curl into ash. Some things don't deserve to be archived. Some things are only meant to be burned. By week 2, the silence on my end had transformed him, not into someone better, into someone louder. He began messaging Nahla. She didn't reply, of course, but she showed me the texts. "Please just ask her to call me. I'm not the villain here. I didn't sign up to be attacked for trying to save money. This is breaking our family. She's acting like I'm the enemy." I laughed when I read them, not out of humor, but the kind of dry, tired disbelief that grows from years of being gaslit. Acting like you're the enemy? He had weaponized normalcy for so long that the moment I removed myself, the moment I dared to say no more, he was shocked I'd treat his betrayal as real, because to him, I wasn't supposed to react. I was supposed to absorb, to carry his decisions without protest, to smile through the resentment and call it patience. Nahla placed her hand over mine and said, "He's spiraling because he doesn't know who to be when you stop playing your part." And that hit hard, because she was right. He wasn't trying to get me back. He was trying to get the version of me that made his life easier, the version who filled in the silence when he had nothing to say, the version who apologized first, the version who stepped in before his mother noticed he'd forgotten her dinner again, the version who erased herself so he could remain whole. But she's gone. And in her place is someone who doesn't care how awkward it gets when he has to sit with himself. Later that day, I got a voicemail from his sister. We hadn't spoken in months. "Hey, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but he says you left out of nowhere. Are you okay? He's saying this is about stress, not the marriage, that you just need a break." That you just need a break. As if my whole life had been a nap I forgot to take, as if years of unspoken labor could be solved with a weekend in a spa and a pat on the head. I didn't respond to her either, not because I was angry, because I was done explaining my exhaustion to people who never helped carry it. That night, I wrote again. This time, the title was simple, "What I Will Never Return To." A marriage where I have to prove my pain. A home where my rest is earned, not given. A man who only apologizes when silence threatens him. The sound of my own voice begging to be heard. Chores called contributions, while his are considered sacrifices. Being told this is just how men are. It wasn't a list of rules, it was a list of boundaries, a blueprint for the life I was beginning to shape without even realizing it. And the more I wrote, the more I saw how low the bar had been all those years. He'd praise me for things he never attempted himself. "You're amazing for handling all of this." Translation: Thank you for making sure I never have to learn. I remember once, years ago, when his mother was sick with the flu. I stayed up with her all night, monitoring her fever, changing sheets, wiping vomit. The next morning, he stepped over the laundry basket and kissed my forehead and said, "You're incredible. I could never do what you do." And I thought it was love. It wasn't. It was relief. Relief that I would always take care of it. Relief that I'd never make him try. Relief that my suffering came with silence. And in a twisted way, I wore that relief like a badge, because I thought that's what made me valuable, until I realized being invaluable to someone who only sees you as a solution isn't love, it's unuse. And the moment you stop being useful, you become a problem. I was now his problem. and that scared him more than any argument we'd ever had, because I wasn't threatening to leave anymore. I had already left. And the longer I stayed gone, the more obvious it became that he had never once asked himself what it meant to keep me. He assumed I'd never go, that the house was enough, that my ring meant forever, no matter the conditions. But forever isn't a contract. It's a choice, renewed in daily care. And care, in its truest form, is reciprocal. He was finding that out now. One missed appointment at a time, one overcooked dinner at a time, one awkward call with his mother who had started asking more questions, because she felt it too, the difference. The way the air shifted when a woman who holds everything together suddenly puts it down. I heard through Nahla. His mother told a neighbor, "He's trying, but it's not the same." It isn't. Because trying is new for him. But it was daily for me. And the rehearsal of regret he was now fumbling through? I had performed that play for years. Only difference is, I stopped believing in the script. There's something about freedom that people don't tell you. It's not loud. It doesn't show up with trumpets or fireworks or some grand scene of revenge. It's quiet. It's sitting on a porch with a warm drink and realizing no one is going to ask where their socks are. It's lighting a candle in a room that smells like your favorite bookstore and knowing the scent was chosen just for you. It's waking up and not being braced for a sigh, a chore list, or the heavy silence of someone punishing you with absence. It's peace, real peace, the kind you forget you even deserve. By the third week of my self-imposed exile, I'd stopped counting the days, because it didn't feel temporary anymore. It felt like a beginning. He, on the other hand, had started to unravel. His emails had shifted from accusations to bargains. "I'll rehire the caregiver. We can divide the duties. Let's go to counseling just once. You're overreacting, but I'm willing to meet you halfway." Meet me halfway? Where exactly has he been standing this whole time? It's not halfway if I've already been carrying both ends. And then came the kicker. A message through Nahla's husband, a man-to-man plea, of course. He says he misses you, that he didn't realize how much you did. That's the line men love when their wives leave. I didn't realize. Not I didn't care, just I didn't notice. As if obliviousness is a defense. As if the months I spent crying in the bathroom were done silently enough that they didn't count. But they did. Every tear, every suppressed scream, every moment I clenched my jaw through dinner because I didn't want his mother to see me fall apart. It all counted. And now, just because the house was quieter and the fridge emptier and the air heavier, suddenly he realized? I didn't want realization. I wanted recognition while I was still standing in front of him, begging to be heard. I had once tried to explain it to him during a rare night when we weren't fighting, just drifting. I said, "Do you ever feel like I'm just slowly disappearing in front of you?" He blinked, said, "You're being dramatic. You're right here." And that was the problem. To him, presence equaled partnership. Effort equaled emotion. Routine equaled commitment. But I had stopped feeling married a long time ago. I just hadn't stopped acting like it. Until now. And every hour I spent in a space that didn't echo with his expectations reminded me how little I'd asked for. How little I'd allowed myself to want. That week, I bought a new set of sheets. Software cotton, sky blue, no shared input, no compromise. Just what I liked. It was a small thing, but it felt like rebellion. And when I crawled into bed that night, beneath clean sheets in a room I didn't have to decorate for someone else's comfort, I realized this was the first time in years I felt like the main character in my own life. Not the supporting cast, not the caregiver, not the emotional translator, just me. And for the first time, that felt like enough. I dreamed that night. Not of him, not of our house, not even of escape. I dreamed of a garden, my hands in the soil, the sun on my face, rows of things growing where nothing had grown before. I woke up with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I made coffee. No one interrupted me. No one asked where I put the cereal. No one left dishes in the sink, just silence. And as I sipped from the mug, I said out loud, not to anyone, not for show, just to myself, I'm not going back. Not because I hated him, but because I loved myself enough now to stop being the unpaid labor in someone else's survival plan. I picked up my phone and blocked his number. No speech, no warning, no explanation. I didn't owe one. And if he ever showed up in person, well, I already had a box packed, not with clothes, with receipts. Receipts of everything I gave, receipts of every unpaid hour, every unacknowledged sacrifice. Every year I put my own life on layaway while he got to play the victim every time he was inconvenienced. And at the very top of the pile, a printed page that read, I don't want your apology. I want my life back. He showed up at Nahla's house. Of course, he didn't knock on my door directly. He parked across the street like a coward and waited in the car for over 20 minutes. I watched from the window of the guest house, not in fear, in clarity. This was a man who only moves when his comfort is threatened, not when someone he loves is hurting, not when his actions hurt others, only when the absence becomes inconvenient. Nahla came out before I could even stand. She walked to his car, arms crossed, eyes like steel. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw the flinch in his shoulders. Then she waved him off like a fly, dismissed him the way I wish I had learned to. He didn't come to the door. He didn't leave a note. He just drove off, tires too fast for a quiet street. Later that night, I got a voicemail. His voice was softer, weaker. You don't even want to hear me out? Pause. You're really going to throw away almost 20 years without talking to me? I deserve a conversation, Hannah. We both do. Number, no, you don't. You deserve what you gave, which was nothing when it mattered. You deserve silence where you gave indifference. You deserve confusion where you gave neglect. You don't deserve my time just because you suddenly realize what it cost you to lose it. That night, I did something symbolic. I opened the last drawer of the dresser in the guest house, the one Nahla said I could use for whatever, and I unpacked my suitcase. Not permanently, just intentionally. I took out my blouses, rolled up my socks, set my shoes neatly in the closet corner. Then I placed the suitcase in the back of the closet. Not because I was staying forever, but because I wasn't running anymore. This wasn't temporary anymore. This was mine. My life. My rules. My peace. 2 days later, I received a manila envelope in the mail. Inside were copies of our shared bills, a proposed agreement, and a typed letter that read more like a script than a statement of love. He called it closure. He said he wanted to settle things like adults. He said this wasn't about blame, that he hoped we could both move on in peace. I laughed out loud, because closure isn't something you request from the person who cracked you open. Closure is what you claim, and I had already done that without his permission. Still, I sent him something back. Not a letter, not a voicemail, just a single page. My lawyer's card paper-clipped to a copy of the Caregiver's termination notice, the one that started it all. On it, I wrote one sentence. You made a decision without me. I'm simply returning the favor. No more explanations, no more rehearsed conversations in my head, no more emotional gymnastics trying to make someone understand what they never intended to hear. I was done begging to be seen by someone who liked me better invisible, and suddenly, everything that once felt terrifying, being alone, starting over, living without a shared routine, felt like oxygen, like breath, like return. A few days later, Nahla and I sat outside under string lights, drinking something fizzy and sweet. She leaned back in her chair and said, You know, you look different. Lighter. I smiled and replied, I'm not holding anyone else's weight anymore. Then I said it again, slower. I'm not holding anyone else's weight anymore. She raised her glass. To that. We clinked glasses, and in that small clink, I buried 19 years of unpaid labor, of emotional cleanup, of second-guessing my right to peace. Because the truth is, he never needed a wife. He needed a mirror. Something to reflect his goodness back at him. Something to make him look whole without ever doing the work. And I am not a mirror. I am a woman. Whole, flawed, furious, and finally, free. 3 weeks after I walked out, I signed the papers. No ceremony, no tears, no hands held across a table, just a smooth pen stroke across a line that once meant forever. My lawyer said, "He's not contesting it, not anymore." Of course not, because it's hard to argue with someone who stops speaking your language. And by then, I had forgotten how to make myself small enough to fit inside his comfort. The next day, I packed up the last of my things from the house. Nahla came with me. So did her cousin Lila. Neither of them asked me if I was okay. They just handed me boxes and hummed along to the playlist I'd made in the car. It was quiet inside the house. His mother wasn't there. She had been moved into a proper facility, one that actually knew how to handle her care. He never told me. I found out through the mail, a redirected invoice left unopened by the door, so he'd finally admitted it, that what I'd done for years wasn't easy or natural or replaceable. It was work, unpaid, unrecognized, expected. We filled 3 boxes, clothes, keepsakes, one old wedding photo I'd kept not out of sentiment, but proof. Proof that I had existed in that house, in that marriage, in that life. I left the keys on the kitchen table, wrote nothing, took nothing that didn't belong to me, and I walked out. It didn't feel like a breakup. It felt like shedding skin. A few days later, I hosted dinner. Not a celebration, not a pity party, a gathering. In my new apartment, small, clean. Light pouring in from all the right angles. A single sunflower in a chipped vase I found at a thrift store. 6 women. No assigned seats. No one in the kitchen, doing all the labor, alone. Everyone brought something. Everyone contributed. No one served more than they received. At some point, as laughter bounced off the walls and the air filled with garlic and rosemary and lemon zest, someone asked, "Do you regret anything?" I paused, took a sip of wine, and I said, "I regret not leaving sooner, but I don't regret staying long enough to know I deserved to." And they understood, because women always do. Later that night, when everyone had gone home and the dishes were stacked in the sink like a soft victory, I lit a candle and sat in the middle of the room. I looked around. No photos of him, no memories that felt like apologies, just me. And in the stillness, I remembered the first time I'd ever felt truly small in my marriage. It was during our 10th anniversary party. He gave a toast. He thanked me for making our house a home, for always being there, for keeping things running. Everyone clapped, and I stood there smiling while shrinking inside, because it sounded like he was praising a housekeeper, not a partner. And I remember thinking, if I disappeared tomorrow, he'd find someone else to do the work, but not the love, not the patience, not the warmth, not the ache of showing up for someone who only remembers to say thank you when other people are listening. And that night, this night, I whispered to myself, "You didn't disappear, Hannah. You left. And that's not the same thing. Disappearing is what happens when you're erased. Leaving is what happens when you finally draw the line. And I had drawn mine in ink, in silence, in sweat, and in every sleepless night I endured waiting for someone to notice I was drowning. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was dry, breathing, building, laughing without the undercurrent of shame, loving people who didn't see me as a utility, living in rooms that didn't expect me to stand while others sat. And I decided right then, no more rooms without chairs for me, no more dinners I cook alone, no more feelings I explain twice, no more silence where there should be softness. If someone wants to be in my life now, they bring a chair. They set their own table. They ask me what I want. And if they can't do that, then they're not invited in, because I've got nothing left to prove, only everything left to be. And I will never again shrink myself to fit into someone else's expectations of love. Love now will be a room full of light, and I'll be standing in the center, visible, vocal, vital, exactly where I belong.